Moving to St. Louis in 2026 might sound like a smart financial move, but there's a catch most people don't see coming. You've probably heard this city is one of the most affordable in the U.S., that you can rent a decent place, keep your bills low, and still have money left over at the end of the month. But is that actually true today, or is that just outdated advice from a few years ago? What does rent really cost in the neighborhoods people are actually moving to? How much are utilities after those brutal Midwest summers and freezing winters? And more importantly, what are the hidden costs that hit you after you've already relocated? Because a lot of people move here expecting one number and end up spending way more. And if you're thinking about relocating and want real information instead of outdated advice, hit subscribe, because this channel is all about helping you make smarter moves before you relocate. In this breakdown, you'll see exactly what it costs to live in St. Louis in 2026, from housing and groceries to transportation and the expenses no one warned you about, so you can decide if this move actually makes sense for you before you commit. Housing is where your entire plan either works or quietly breaks down. Picture this. Someone relocates here thinking they found a deal. Cheap rent, great photos, looks perfect online. But after moving in, they realize they're far from the areas they actually want to live in, longer drives, fewer amenities, and completely different daily experience than they expected. That's the gap most relocators fall into. On paper, St. Louis still looks cheap, but in the neighborhoods people actually choose, like Central West End, Tower Grove, or The Grove, a one-bedroom apartment in 2026 usually lands between $1,100 and $1,600. Newer or more modern units push closer to $1,700 or more. A two-bedroom, that's often $1,500 to $2,200, depending on the building and amenities. Now, here's where the decision gets real: rent or buy. A lot of people assume buying is the smarter move because home prices are still lower than the national average. And it's true. Median home prices sit around $260,000 to $320,000 depending on the area. But what most people don't calculate up front is the full monthly reality. With current interest rates, your mortgage could easily land between $1,800 and $2,400 per month. Add property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, and suddenly that affordable house doesn't feel so light anymore. So what should you do as a relocator? If you're new to St. Louis, renting first is usually the smarter move. It gives you flexibility. You get to learn the neighborhoods, understand your commute, and figure out where your lifestyle actually fits without locking yourself into a long-term commitment. Because St. Louis is extremely neighborhood driven, two areas just minutes apart can feel completely different. Buying makes more sense after you've lived here and know exactly where you want to be. And don't forget the hidden costs. Even renters face extra charges now: parking, pet fees, trash services, and amenity fees that quietly push your monthly total higher. That's $1,300. Apartment could end up closer to $1,450 or more. So the takeaway: St. Louis can still be affordable, but only if you approach housing with a clear strategy. Utilities are one of those costs that seem small at first until you actually live through a full year here. And this is where many relocators get surprised, because it's not just about your average monthly bill. It's about how much those numbers swing depending on the season. In the summer, St. Louis gets hot and humid. Not open the windows hot, more like constant air conditioning just to stay comfortable. That can push your electricity bill anywhere from $120 to $200 or more per month, depending on your space. Then winter hits. Freezing temperatures mean heating costs kick in, especially if your place runs on gas. That's another $100 to $180 range, sometimes higher during extreme cold snaps. So while you might average around $150 to $250 monthly for basic utilities, electricity, gas, water, and trash, the real challenge is planning for those spikes. Now add the essentials many people overlook. Internet typically runs between $60 and $90 per month, and if you're working remotely, reliability matters. But if you lean toward higher end options, that same budget rises quickly. There are also solid local grocery chains where most people shop. Prices there are moderate, but not the cheapest. So the first adjustment is simple: learn where to shop. Now let's talk about eating out. St. Louis has an underrated food scene, and it's easy to eat out more often because it feels affordable. A quick lunch runs $12 to $18, dinner $25 to $40 per person, and that's where things add up fast. This is where many relocators lose control of their budget without noticing. They expect lower costs but keep the same habits or even spend more. So what's realistic? If you cook most meals, expect 300 to 500 monthly and add dining out and it jumps to 500 to 700 or more. St. Louis gives you the option to save, but your habits decide if you actually do. Transportation is another major factor. St. Louis is a car-dependent city. Public transportation exists, but coverage is limited. If you're not near these routes, relying on it daily becomes difficult. So for most people, owning a car isn't optional, it's necessary. Gas typically runs $120 to $200 per month. Insurance adds $100 to $180. Maintenance averages another $50 to $100. That puts most people between $300 and $500 monthly. But there is a way to live without a car. If you live in a walkable area or near transit lines and use ride-share services when needed, you can reduce or even avoid car ownership. It's less convenient, but it can save you hundreds of dollars per month. Now let's talk about the costs that don't show up on paper at first. Healthcare, gym memberships, entertainment, subscriptions, it all adds up. You're typically looking at $300 to $700 monthly depending on your lifestyle. Then come the small expenses: registration fees, household items, random services, seasonal spending. These can add another $100 to $200 without you noticing. So what does this mean overall? To live comfortably and not just get by, you're realistically looking at around $2,000 to $3,000 per month as a single person. Still affordable compared to many cities, just not as cheap as most people expect. Let's make this real. A typical relocator might spend around $1,300 on rent, $250 on utilities, $500 on food, $400 on transportation, and about $300 on lifestyle expenses. That puts the total at roughly $2,750 per month. If you optimize your lifestyle, you might bring that closer to $2,200 per month. If you upgrade your lifestyle, it can easily go above $3,200. That's the reality. Your choices determine your costs. So is moving here worth it? If you expect ultra cheap living, you might be disappointed. But if you're looking for flexibility, lower cost than major cities, and a place where your decisions actually impact your budget, this city still delivers. It's not about being cheap. It's about being strategic. And if you want more breakdowns like this to help you make the right move, subscribe to this channel and like this video.